Welcome to 10 Reasons to Revive the Communication in Your Marriage. My name is Elisa DiLorenzo, co-founder of One Extraordinary Marriage and co-host of the top-rated marriage podcast on iTunes, the One Extraordinary Marriage Show. More importantly, I am a spouse who has struggled with communication in my own marriage to Tony. There were years when we really didn't seem to talk about anything. Years when I didn't know if we were going to make it because the distance between the two of us seemed so great. Years when it actually seemed easier not to talk. My guess is that if you took the time to come and check this out, some of what I have already said resonates with you. I don't know your story specifically, but I do know that when there are communication challenges in your marriage, you feel isolated, lonely, sad, heartbroken, and the list goes on. I don't know if you're the one looking to fix the communication or if you are the one who has been resistant to working on the communication. What I do know is that in sharing these 10 reasons with you, you will learn why time is of the essence and why now is the time to make a difference in your marriage. So let's get started. Marriage is much more than a Hollywood blockbuster. Don't you just wish that you and your spouse could sit down and have a conversation like you saw in that movie last week? You know the one I'm talking about. He says this, she says that, and at the end, it all works out happily ever after. Cue the romantic music. None of you get the luxury of having screenwriters give you the perfect words, the perfect lighting, and the stage to have intimate talks with your spouse. Instead, little things, and not so little things like work, kids, and other obligations have gotten in the way of the two of you having deep conversations. In the busyness of life, who has time for the heart-to-heart conversations like you saw in that last romantic movie? The better question to ask yourself is this: who doesn't have the time? If you don't choose to make your spouse a priority, and by that I mean actually talking to them, eventually your marriage will wither and die. Your life, your marriage is not controlled by the writers or even by outside forces. It's controlled by you and your spouse. It's up to each of you to make the communication in your marriage a priority. From the wedding to what happened. Remember back to your wedding day. And really, even before that, if the two of you were anything like us, you spent hours getting to know each other, hours talking about everything under the sun, from the pets you had as a kid to where you wanted to travel to what your family was like, to what you wanted to do with your life. Those conversations brought the two of you closer, revealing the heart and soul of your spouse. Tony and I met in Boulder, Colorado, and spent hours up in the Flatirons, sharing our lives with one another. Then we were long distance for our senior year of college and would spend hours on the phone every single day, sharing all the intimate details of our lives. And I'm sure many of you can relate to those long, deep conversations you had while you were dating. Then, like us, you said your I do's, and with that came the house, the job, for some of you kids, the bills, the time with friends, volunteering, kids' activities, family obligations, and on and on and on. Now your conversations probably sound more like this. Don't forget to pick up milk on your way home. Sarah has a soccer game tonight across town. I won't be home for dinner. I have to go to a meeting, work late, meet friends. Honey, the car needs an oil change. Michael needs a ride to his friend's house. It's hard to feel connected when the conversations never seem to go any deeper than this. It's hard to be connected when really you could be having these conversations with anyone. Number 1. Drift happens. On one hand, it's so much easier to just coast through life, coast through your marriage, just going through the motions, than it is to really invest in your relationship. However, without intentionality in your marriage, the two of you end up wondering instead of knowing what you have in common. When your conversations never go deeper, when you never spend time talking about what is below the surface, it's easy to feel like the person that you sit across the table from or share a bed with has become a complete stranger. We often hear this from couples who have little children or couples whose children have left the home. And even the workaholics are not exempt. Why does drift happen? So much of the marriage, and by extension the conversations, have revolved around the children and their activities that the couple, the husband and wife, have lost sense of who they are as a couple. And maybe in your case, you don't have kids, but instead you have highly demanding jobs that keep the two of you preoccupied. You have little time for one another. And in all these cases, it's almost as if you aren't married. You're just roommates. The two of you need to make your communication a priority to head off the drift that is a natural tendency for most couples. You need to have the conversations that are about the two of you, who you are in relation to one another and in relation to your marriage. Making time to talk to one another refocuses the relationship on the two of you instead of all of the other things in life. Number 2, you're tired of the masks. It's so easy to hide behind the masks. Everything is good is the national motto. You have the house with the white picket fence, the 2.2 kids, the car, the job. We're good. That's what you tell anyone who asks. And yet those unspoken words, those are the ones that can destroy all that you have built together. Too often, one spouse is afraid to rock the boat, afraid that by saying how they truly feel, they'll hurt their spouse, cause an argument, bring up something that might make the other uncomfortable. And so they don't say anything. They stuff down their feelings, hiding behind the fairy tale image that is their marriage. The problem with this lack of communication is that those feelings, they don't go away. And the situations, they don't disappear. In fact, they can often become worse the longer the two of you go without talking, really talking to one another. I know. This was my marriage. Everything looked good on the surface, and yet underneath, we were a mess. I told everyone we were doing just fine. It seemed better to keep up the image than to let others know that things weren't as good as it seemed. I thought we didn't need help. And yet we did. A lot of help. Our marriage wasn't going to change until we started working on this area that had stopped working. Our communication. Equipping yourselves with the tools to be able to have effective communication allows the little things and not so little things to be dealt with immediately so that the two of you don't add on to the masks with each other. Those masks, that idea that if you just put on a happy face, they're keeping the two of you from the true connectedness that you desire. Number 3, you want to be heard. Each one of you has a deep need to be heard, to feel validated. Making your communication a focus allows the two of you to be able to experience that. It also teaches the two of you that you don't necessarily communicate in the same way. So often in marriages, couples develop patterns of speaking to one another that over time, they become ineffective. Things like interrupting, shutting down, dismissing comments, putting one another down. Over time, these behaviors lead to one of you choosing not to participate in the conversation. There's a sense for that spouse that they will not be heard, or they'll be misunderstood, or just simply dismissed. There's a saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can, however, teach a willing spouse how to best communicate with you. A husband and wife that I've worked with had two very different communication styles. The husband, he prefers to encourage others. He's more soft-spoken and not given so much to confrontation, but rather positive encouragement. And the wife, on the other hand, she likes the direct approach. Things with her are very black and white. Let's just deal with our situations and move on. When I first started working with them, they were dealing with each other in their own personal styles. The wife was very direct with her husband. The husband was very positive and encouraging, less confrontational with his wife. And this couple struggled because they didn't feel like their communication was going anywhere. When they made some minor adjustments to their communication styles in terms of the wife becoming more encouraging and less confrontational, and the husband becoming more direct and more black and white with his wife in his communication styles, they started feeling like they were being heard. They started feeling validated in their conversations. They actually started communicating with one another. Do you truly know how your spouse wants to be talked to? Have you ever asked, is the direct approach better? The softer approach? Does your spouse like to talk in the morning? Or is the evening better? Incorporating these answers into how the two of you communicate will help you to be heard and help your spouse to be able to listen. Number 4, it leads to more. Working on your communication fosters a deep sense of emotional connection, which in turn leads to increased physical connection. Now, some of you are thinking this sounds like the old chicken and egg scenario, and it is, because so many couples wrestle with which comes first, the emotional intimacy or the physical. One spouse may need physical intimacy to be able to be emotionally connected, and the other may need emotional intimacy in order to be physically intimate. For most couples, once they stop talking to one another, the physical intimacy often drops off too. When that happens, you have a double whammy. The emotional needs of the couple aren't being met, and the physical needs aren't being met either. There isn't much left of the marriage when that happens. You probably even know couples where it seemed like they stopped talking, and then they stopped having sex or any type of physical intimacy, and then you found out about their divorce. This may even be where your marriage is headed right now. Choosing to revive your communication and by extension your emotional connectedness leads to a desire to be physically intimate as well. Why? Because when you feel like you can trust your husband or wife with your emotional intimacy, you feel a stronger bond and willingness to trust them with your physical intimacy. Sex is not just a physical act. It is one of the most highly emotional acts that a husband and wife can engage in. And if you're the high desire spouse in terms of sex, you might want to consider spending more time really talking with your spouse in order to foster that emotional connection. Number 5, money matters. Learning to communicate about finances is one of the most difficult areas for couples. So much emotion is tied up in how we deal with all those dollar signs. Not talking about finances makes all of the problems seem bigger because the two of you don't know where the other stands. I don't know how much money she spends at the store. He just goes out and buys whatever toy he wants. I had no idea we were spending that much money eating out on entertainment or on clothes. We're broke, and I have no idea how we got here. These are all statements that we've heard. In all honesty, statements that have been made in our own home. These statements were made by couples who have never learned how to open a dialogue about their finances. And it's not surprising. Most of you did not grow up in homes where your parents talked about money. Neither of our parents talked about money or taught us about money. It's been a huge learning experience trying to figure out when and how to have these conversations. And yet now that we've taken the emotional energy out of our finances by being able to talk about the numbers, our marriage has reached new levels of closeness. Learning how to navigate the emotions that come with discussing money can be a challenge. But being on the same page and understanding your financial life, that's priceless. Number 6, time is running out. You only have a finite amount of time. It's a fact that if you do not choose to revive your communication, there is only so long that the two of you will be able to last together. Who wants to be in a relationship where their spouse does not talk to them? No one. Why would you? Almost daily, we receive emails saying, "My wife or my husband has asked for a divorce. I'm trying to talk to them and now they're saying it's too late. They don't want to talk anymore." Choosing not to talk with your spouse, choosing to be the stubborn one who isn't going to talk until they do, choosing to punish your spouse with the silent treatment, none of these strategies are effective in building your marriage. Each one of you was created to be in community, to be able to share your thoughts, especially with the person that you committed to spending the rest of your life with. Unfortunately, most of you live as if you have all the time in the world. You, or maybe it's your spouse, expect that all of the bad habits, especially a lack of communication, will be tolerated indefinitely. Everyone has a breaking point. Breaking those habits is not easy, and yet it can be done. Choosing to communicate allows the two of you to make the most of every moment that you have together. Number 7, rediscover one another. Reviving your communication allows the two of you to rediscover one another, to find joy in one another, to create new memories from shared experiences of the things that you've been wanting to do, but have never really brought up to one another. When your communication has been sitting at the surface for a while, it's easy to lose sight of what makes your spouse special. It's easy to stop spending time together because really, what do you have in common? How many of you listening to this have played the "what do you want to do" game? You know, the one that goes like this. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Just pick something already. It doesn't matter to me. You pick something. It's all fun and games until someone gets frustrated, and then the two of you don't want to be around each other. Making your communication a priority allows the two of you to rediscover who this person is that you married. Interests change over time. We all change over time. What does your spouse like to do now? What do they want to try? No more "what do you want to do?" Sitting in the car, frustrated. Rediscovering one another allows you to have a plan. What memories do the two of you want to create together? There's only one way to know the answers to these questions, and that is to ask. It's like dating all over again. Every interaction with your spouse creates a memory. Every time that you choose to find out what they are thinking, what they want to do, what is going on inside their head, you validate your husband or your wife. You demonstrate just how important they are to you. I wonder what your spouse would like to try, but hasn't had the courage to tell you. Number 8, your words don't work. Learning to really talk to one another again takes the conversation from sounding like the teacher in Charlie Brown, the wah, 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 to sharing and really being heard. Remember me talking about those ineffective patterns of communication a while back, the interrupting, the shutting down, dismissing comments? Well, often with couples, the same thing happens with the words they choose. Statements that start with, "You always," "You never," "I just wish that you would," "Why can't you?" These extreme absolutes and statements with a negative focus are complete conversation killers. Your spouse tunes you out the minute you say one of the phrases, and the rest of the time that you're talking, nothing is being heard. Breaking the cycle of these phrases and learning new ways to talk to one another allows the two of you to stop sounding like the Charlie Brown teacher and start sounding like the person that he or she fell in love with. You want your spouse to not only hear the words that you're saying, but also to understand the context in which they are given. The ineffective words are killing your communication. Isn't it time that you learned what to say to your husband or wife? Number 9, it's an emergency. These firefighters are responding to an emergency. They don't know exactly what they're going to face, but they know how to assess the situation, devise a strategy, and take care of business. Not working on your communication can create an emergency that isn't so easily dealt with. It's better to be proactive in your relationship than to wait for things to, quote, get really bad. Just okay is bad enough. When couples start to talk to us about their communication, it's often because things have escalated to an emergency or crisis phase. It often seems as if the warning signals were simply ignored. Warning signals like, "Please talk to me. I think we need help. We don't talk like we used to." Some of you have heard these statements very recently, or maybe you even said them yourself. The pain, it's very raw and very real. Every marriage will face emergencies. That's a fact. It's a promise. It's a certainty. The thing is that by working on your communication starting today, you can eliminate a lack of communication as one of the situations that the two of you have to deal with. Knowing that you are able to turn to your spouse and talk to him or her when you're facing challenging and difficult circumstances equips you to be just like these firefighters, ready and protected from the challenges that come ahead. Number 10, rock solid foundation. Having strong communication skills in your marriage provides the two of you with a rock solid foundation. When you know that you can share your heart with your spouse, there is nothing that needs to be left unsaid. Now, the blocks in this picture, they're huge. And maybe in your marriage, they represent your jobs, your kids, your house, or other things that you identify with success. There's not a lot that could move them, and yet they could crumble. Because if you look close, you'll see that there are gaps between these blocks. Gaps where unspoken words, hurt feelings, disappointments, they can all linger and weaken the strength of your marriage. Making the decision to work on the communication in your marriage is like pouring cement in and around these blocks. Solid communication becomes the glue that holds your marriage together. It is the strength on which the two of you can rely no matter what. When you reflect on your marriage, do you see a rock-solid foundation? Or do you see a foundation that has holes in it? A foundation with cracks? A foundation that isn't really as strong as you would like it to be? Don't just look at your marriage and say, things are good because we've got our finances in place, we have a good house, our kids are well behaved, and so on. Those are just the blocks. You need the communication glue to hold it all together. I sincerely hope that you got some useful information from this webinar and that you and your spouse are able to use it to improve your marriage. Remember, in the long run, even the smallest steps can make a huge difference. Just a few small adjustments to the interaction with your spouse can have a tremendous compounding effect on the quality of your marriage. Keep in mind, most married couples experience serious issues within their marriage. So don't worry. Having challenges with your marriage is normal. Start taking consistent small steps to improving your interaction and behavior to better work with your spouse. In doing so, your marriage can only get better. One of those most crucial small steps to take is a very basic one. Improve communication. It's the one thing that most marriage professionals agree on that can potentially turn any marriage around. Especially since in a recent survey, most marriage counselors name poor communication as the number one cause of divorce. By simply improving your skills, you significantly increase the chance of your marriage thriving. Communication makes all the difference. On that note, I'd like to take just a minute to invite you to check out one of our most popular programs. It's called He Zigs, She Zags, Get Your Communication on the Same Path. This is a straightforward, actionable way to develop solid communication skills between you and your spouse. This program has helped thousands of couples worldwide. It is proven, and we are confident that it can help you. I invite you to take a moment right now and click the button below this video. Remember, Tony and I are so sure that we can help you, we will take all the risk. So take a moment right now and check it out. And I want to thank you again for watching this webinar. Stay tuned for our future webinars and podcasts, and be sure to get connected with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and many of our other social channels. We love hearing from you, so give us your feedback and comments. Let us know how we can help you. We're committed to helping you and your spouse make your marriage what it should be, an extraordinary one. Thanks for watching. Until next time.